I want to welcome everyone to the Portland Chinatown Museum. My name is Anna Truxas. I am the executive director. We're thrilled that we are kicking off our second Hidden History series with the Oregon Chinese Diaspora Project. Chelsea Rose is here to represent and moderate today. And we want to point out that the work of OCDP is focused on Chinese American history in Oregon, and what the first Hidden History series did was uncover a wealth of information. And Chelsea was commenting last night that, you know, this round there are so many other projects, so it's just a quickly growing field, which is so exciting. Okay, who has readers? This is new for me. I don't have them on me as much as I should, so thank you. Okay. Oh, great. This is a team effort. So Jessica Curteman has a diverse employment history of her over 20 years of working as an archaeologist, from Oregon State University to the Bureau of Land Management to Oregon State Historic Preservation's Office to the tribal governments and now to ODOT, where she currently serves as the Region 2 Archaeologist and Tribal Liaison. Jessica earned a Bachelor and Master's of Arts degree in Anthropology and Archaeology from Oregon State University, and was born and raised in Oregon, where she spent much of her childhood working on agricultural farms. Daniel W. Kee is Bue Kee's nephew, photography enthusiast, and Professor Emeritus of Psychology at California State University at Fullerton. And Tiah Edmunson-Morton is an archivist at Oregon State University's Special Collections and Archives Research Center, where she started the Oregon Hops and Brewing Archives, the first in the country, in 2013. Beyond her work as an archivist, teacher, and oral historian, she researches and writes about beer in the Pacific Northwest, with a particular focus on the wives of the 19th century brewers. So a little preemptive round of applause for my colleagues here. So yeah, they're each gonna share a little bit about their research, and then like Anna said, then we'll open it up to some more folks that have some ties to this theme, and then if there's time, we'll do Q&A. Otherwise, there's more events coming throughout the day to explore this. So first we have Jessica. Do you want to come up and just as a note, because we're recording, there might be a slight delay between presentations. Okay, how do I get out of the view here?
Okay, so this is a presentation on an archaeology site that I've had the pleasure to work and hire many other folks to help me work on. And so what I'd like to do is try to get a gist of what the site is about, but really touch on what makes this particular project and site unique, and that kind of refreshed feeling that I was mentioning I get when I get to work on a project like this. So okay, let me minimize this so you guys don't have to see that. Just want to make sure you see this slide. Yes, absolutely. Okay, there we go. All right, so in general, so I work for the Oregon Department of Transportation. I am an archaeologist and tribal liaison. And what that means is I am part of ODOT's environmental section, where on every project that ODOT creates, makes, maintenance, emergency projects, all of that, they have to go through an environmental clearance. And that's, and part of that environmental clearance involves multiple disciplines. And one of the disciplines is cultural resources, archaeologists and architectural historians. And it's to aim to help preserve and enhance the natural and historic elements that make Oregon unique. So in every project that ODOT does, we do a cultural inspection. We look to make sure that there are no archaeology resources, and if there are, try to learn as much as we can about them or avoid them to protect them, that sort of thing. Very similar to how if there was an endangered plant or endangered owl or something that was there, similar protections. So the site that I'm going to be talking about is this little square. You can see on the screen, you can see my cursor right here, this little tiny square. It's right off of I-5, right? Think ODOT highways. And I put this slide up. I'm not going to go over all the steps, but essentially these are all the steps that were taken in the process of finding the site, all the way to, okay, now we need to learn more about the site. So, but I wanted to show this picture because it kind of gave a really good gives an overview of the area that we're talking about. This is an intersection, this is I-5. And the site that we're talking about is this green patch right here, which is just brambles, blackberry bushes, everything, very, very overgrown, avoided by the farmer for many, many years. And the reason ODOT is doing a project there is that intersection. This is the Aurora Donald intersection. It is extremely dangerous. It gets backed up along I-5, and so ODOT is doing a total reconstruction of that intersection. So here's a kind of a close-up view of today. Now, I got to say too that I did not do a majority of this work. I was the conduit to move money to folks that have the staff to do this kind of work. And so HRA, Historical Research Associates, were hired by ODOT to do the investigative archaeological work. And in doing that, there was some background research that you have to do first. And these are preliminary research, desktop background. And we saw that historic aerials, that there were some structures there. There used to be some structures from the 30s. So we were kind of expecting, this is from the 1960s. We've got a little bit of a change of a structure. The structures changed. There's new ones, there's older ones. So what this indicates, though, is that the likelihood of finding archaeology in this spot is pretty high. We're going to find some domestic items, probably some building materials. So we needed to do some further investigation. So after the blackberries were removed, we were able to put in some units because definitely there were artifacts that were coming out of the ground. And so a larger excavation had to occur because ODOT cannot avoid impacting the site. Typically, if I come to the planning department or the other planners and I'm like, hey, there's an archae site here, they're like, cool, let's do anything and everything in our power to avoid impacting it because it's very expensive, it's time consuming. And yeah, so, but in this case, with a full intersection redo, and this is right at the intersection, next to no chance of avoiding it. So excavations occurred. There were lots of items that were found, including foundations from the previous house and bricks from the previous house that had been demolished, and that demolition material kind of pushed into like its basement, which is pretty common. Part of this was the material culture, and this is really, the material culture is what this data recovery is what it's called, was really trying to focus on, because that preliminary research indicated that not only was this homestead occupied by European or white settlers, and then also farmers, it was also occupied by Chinese American families. And this was seen in the census records, which I'll show ahead, but it was also very obviously coming up in the archaeology record, in the material record. So here we have just a sample, just a small sample of some of the stuff that was found there. Everything that you would honestly expect for a domestic household. So dishes and medicinal pieces, currency, games. These are all, the broken, dirty pictures of them. And on top of that, toys. There were some toys in little kids' tea set, and this is the sideways porcelain doll head right here. There was also some really cool finds, which this mess right there that it looks like a mess was actually a really exciting find. It's kind of like a little barrel or something that was full of stuff, and then it got compressed. So the stuff that ring is likely that the ring of the barrel, And then the stuff that was inside of it was really, really neat looking. There was a big storage vessel, for food items, and so quite a good little cache of things, which archaeologists love that. So diving into more of the research side of it was, okay, this site is unique in a sense that we don't have a lot of archaeology sites that represent Chinese Americans or Chinese families working in the agricultural field. A lot of archaeology is related to seeing Chinese families and workers in cities or railroads. However, we know that everybody was working everything. But for the archaeological record, it's not that common to see it. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why, but that could be another hour of presentation. So at this site, we wanted to really dive into who was here. And thankfully, we have the census records, and thankfully they were filled out correctly. So this is a 1910 census record for the property. And we have and I apologize, I'm terrible with pronunciation. So I very much apologize if I mispronounce any of these names or words. We have Quan Li with brothers Si Wang Ju and Joe of the Ah family. These individuals were renting the house and they were working in the nearby fields. They were laborers. And then in the 1930 record, we have a different family. We have the Chin family. This is a family with we have Eddie and Violet and their children, Jean, Elwood, Sing, Leland, and Helen. There were also two boarders with them, both John Wan, John Dunn. They were living with them and they were marked on there as laborers for the hops fields. So here we have the kids, and it makes sense that we would find kids' toys, tea set, dolls, that sort of thing. So this is great. Now we have some names. And there's a lot I'm skimming over here, so please, I apologize. But so from those names, we as in the greater HRA crew and researchers, started with just going to findagrave.com and to look for information. And they were able to find this woman's grave site. She goes by Violet. And the information that was put on the findagrave.com site, the author of that information was contacted to get a little bit more information, saying, hey, noticed, we'd like to know more about this individual. Well, come to find out, the person that was inputting that was a descendant, or is a descendant of Violet. And she said, oh yeah, I can get you contacts. So contact tree, pretty soon we are talking to descendants of Violet and I'm sorry, I don't have the name. Violet and Chin. I know it's the Chin family, but Mr. Chin, talking to their descendants. The picture up in the corner is a picture of two of Violet's kids, and working in agricultural fields. So Violet and it's killing me, I don't have my notes in front of me. He has a Mr. Chin. I'll just call him Mr. Chin. So Violet and Mr. Chin lived on the property. They were renting from the landowners, because also during this time was when Oregon had their an exclusion act where Japanese and other alien immigrant individuals could not own or purchase property. And so during this time, a lot of Japanese and Chinese and other identified alien immigrants were having to rent. And in this case, Violet and Mr. Chin were renting from the landowners, but the landowners were not living on the property. But the landowners did help teach how to grow hops and how to manage the nearby hops fields and that sort Unfortunately, Mr. Chin succumbed to an accident, and it kind of left him unable to really take care of his family. And he needed to be moved to a hospital permanently. And this left Violet, who had very limited English speaking, with her 7 kids, essentially widowed. And Mr. Chin was still alive, but he was no longer able to provide. So Violet, with her 7 kids, gathered up. They had a team. They likely had a Model T, loaded everything up, and moved to Portland. Now, the reason I mentioned this is because in the archaeology record, we have a lot of these really big pieces that are beautiful, that were left behind. And one of the questions is, why would you leave this behind? Now, maybe it was broken and thrown away, but some of these pieces were not broken, or they were recently broken after they were left behind. So why were these left behind? Well, if you and 7 children have to pack into a Model T and drive up to Portland, you're going to be very, very limited with what you can bring. So that could be why there's quite a few large and really, you would think, unique or memorable, things you would want to take with you, but you got to make a decision. So Violet moved up to Portland. She had 4 children on the property, on what is called the farm. So I want to, this is kind of where I want to take a step back to, and like, these are some photos that were shared. All these photos of the families were shared by the descendants, and we have been so honored to have such a great connection and communications with the descendants of both sides of the families. They have pictures, and the first connection was really exciting because they knew growing up about the farm and have pictures of the farm and heard stories about the farm, but never knew where the farm was. And so here we are reaching out saying, hey, we have this farm, do you know anything about that? And it was just kind of this like beautiful pieces coming together thing, which in archaeology, you dream of that sort of thing, but it very rarely happens. And it really just, it's a nice reminder, because archaeology is really focused on material culture, right? The stuff that gets left behind. And it's really easy to kind of forget that there's people behind that stuff. And so this site, while I showed you a picture, the brambles, it's not, what we would consider like a really attractive looking site. There's not like a beautiful building or some crazy, buried cellar that has all these preserved. It's nothing really crazy to look at. And the materials themselves, they're broken and dirty and everything, but it's about what it represents and the fact that we get to do all of this hefty research into it and connect the pieces. So everything we're doing with this site, including what I'm doing here today, is we want to preserve and put out this information as much as we can, because this is very exciting right now, but I want this to also be very exciting 30, 40 years from now, when descendants of the descendants want to look back. And I want it to be discoverable. So I don't want it to be, oh, hey, here's this archaeology report I found at the, antique store down the street that had like, your friend's name, mom's name on it, or something like that. I don't want it to be discoverable in that way. So these are some photos that were shared. Not sure if this is actually on the farm. However, there was really good investigative work done by the family member that shared these, and kind of suspect that maybe they are, based on the plow lines, where the buildings are located, the cow. So this is kind of wrapping up, and apologize if I'm taking way too much time, but like I said, I could do hours on this. But we were able to take the descendants to the farm and what's left of it, and be on the property. It was very rainy, it's very muddy, it was very loud because it's a truck stop intersection. But at least we got to be there, and it was really fun. Stories were shared, treats were shared, and it's really neat. Today, right now, I mean, if anybody drives on I-5 right now, you go through the Aurora Donald construction, and it'll be like that for a couple of years. sorry. It's a very big project. But so right now where they're standing is all paved now. And so, and that's what happens though, right? And so that's why there's this obligation and a desire to go in and learn as much as you can about the material culture. Now we're done with the material culture stuff. Like we've gotten what we can during construction. HRA, the company that's been working on all the archaeology, they monitored all of the ground disturbance, all of the construction, so that if something new popped up, they could snag it, record it, recover it, that sort of thing. So that's ongoing. And now we're at the fun part where, okay, we have all the stuff. Now we get to go out and actually apply it to the real world. So
Exciting.
and then, of course, like I had mentioned, we want this to prolong us. And part of that is working with Chelsea and the Oregon Chinese Diaspora Project. That is the next step, is to really start getting out the story and getting it out to audiences everywhere, not just archaeologists. So the public, putting it in the Portland Chinese Weekly in Chinese and a couple dialects, so that even if English, fluent in English, sometimes it's just different to read it in the language that the story would have been told in. So yeah, so thank you very much. Please feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. Just maybe have a block of time set aside, because I do like to talk about this project. Thank you.
Good morning, and I'm pleased to have all you here joining us, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join the panel this morning. When I come to the museum, I feel like I'm coming home. My first home was at 415 Everett Street, which is a stone's throw from here. I don't think I can throw that far anymore, but I have childhood memories, at least I'm told, these memories of being walked to the train station in the morning by my uncles. And this was the home of the Kee family and a cousin or two. And then my family moved to Southern California. I'm going to share with you this morning some photos from Bill's photo albums from the first three. The first album has, over 80 pages of pictures, and there are many pictures from the hop farms. And then there are later albums have pictures of transition to art school, the Depression years, and more. And these albums are currently at the Portland Chinatown Museum. I can also provide photos that I've scanned from these albums too. And Kathleen only has my email. She can provide you with my email. There's a bit of time travel here with my presentation. I'm a big Star Trek guy, so I believe in time travel. So I've often been asked, how did Bill get to the hop farms to take these wonderful pictures? And the first pictures are in 2017. And let's see if this works here. Well, the story really starts back in Portland Chinatown. And before that, it starts off in China with my grandfather, which they refer to as Kiki. I've never met my grandfather. He passed away many years before I was born. But he came over at the age of 16 to work on the railroad. But now, how did he get from the railroad to Chinatown? I actually have a picture of, well, it was in the museum at the opening of Bill's show in 23. He was provided an opportunity to hang over a cliff with rope, and he declined the opportunity. I think it's affectionately referred to as a Chinaman's chance, and those might be the individuals that were hung over the cliff in a basket planning the dynamite charges. So the only stories I have is he was hung over with a pick. So I have no evidence that he was planting dynamite charges in the wall. So he declined that opportunity, and moved to Portland Chinatown and established a Bue Kee family laundry. I first saw these when the Portland Chinatown Museum was assembling the Bue Kee show back in '23. And these are paintings by Bill on the exterior and on the interior. And you won't be able to read the little stories below. So I did bring in some hard copies, and you can come up after and you can take a close look at these images and read the stories about the paintings. Let's see if I can keep track of all this. Let me see what the next slide is. Maybe that helped me out here. Okay. So now, how did Bill and the family, Bue Kee, as the grandfather was referred to, how did they get to the hop farms? Well, there are stories that I've been told, and my cousin Phil Jan, son of May Kee Jan, conveyed about the Tong activity in Portland. And so they took the opportunity to move to hop farming. Now, I've heard different stories about this. One story is I'm not quite sure how he got a job there. And the other story I heard was it was a lead from a cousin in the Dong family that he should take over, sort of like being the foreman. I think the first one was the Bue Kee farm. So those are two different stories. But here is my grandfather, Bue Kee. He had two older sons. Hong was the oldest and Ming was the second. They both worked on the hop farms too. I have pictures I'll show you too of Bill on the hop farm. We have Hong's number one son, Gordon, in the audience here. And one of the amazing things about these photo albums is that how well preserved the pictures were. And he was very conscientious, Bill, in captioning the pictures. And we just have wonderful identifications of where these pictures were taken and who the individuals were in the pictures. Otherwise, if I didn't know that was my grandfather or Gordon's father, I wouldn't know who these people are by looking at the pictures. So what I've done here is I've assembled some facsimiles of what the pages in these albums would look like. And on display over there on the right side are some album pages, so you can actually see what these pages look like. But it was quite amazing, and I go through these quite often, and every time I sort of learn more about the family and who the individuals are. And so up here we have a collection of hop pickers in the hops. And then down here, we actually have Hong and Ming with some members of the family. And here we have Mr. Crystal on a tractor in the hop farm. But again, these are facsimiles, so I pulled pictures. But you'll see in those that sometimes the pages have 6 to 8 pictures, and sometimes there's more. Let me see what's next here. Okay. This is a picture that was taken of the residence and that's actually Bill up here. And then here's my dad as a child. So if we time travel from 1917 to 28, this is the picture that Bill took. You can see my dad growing up here. And then we have other family members and other workers at the hop farm on the right. And if we come back, time traveling back to 2017 again, here is a photo of Bill in the hop farms. And as you flip through the albums, you're going to see a lot of little dress-ups where Bill labels it farmer boy, city boy. And so you could almost see in his mind that, he's thinking about he'll be in the city someday. And as you look through the album, you're going to see pictures that have color. And the bio that I sent up here said photography enthusiast. So I figured I better figure out something about how did he colorize these pictures. So I've learned that, you know, in the late 19th century, painting of black and white photos was an art form. And it was in many ways a transition to painting as an art form. And it was a highly regarded art form. And I can say more to you when we can chat about what I've learned about this. But I think it's amazing that in these albums, you can see evidence of Bill playing with color. And I hope this leads to the next slide. We'll see. If not, I'll have to tell you more about it. No, it doesn't. Uh, one of the in his albums are pictures of hop fields. We have buildings, people pushing things up to the just amazing pictures. This is a picture of the Chinese bunkhouse. It's labeled differently depending on which picture I'm showing. And there's a little story here. It talks about what my grandfather was doing, and something that he cooked enough rice for 50 or more people. So perhaps the Chinese bunkhouse, you know, it makes sense. And I have a hard copy of this too, so you can actually read the story. Because I projected, you wouldn't be able to read it from the screen, and I wasn't going to read it to you. Don't often read right, you know, different words come out sometimes. Let's see what this next one is. This is all going to be a surprise. Oh, okay. One of the threads in this talk today has to do with the connection between his photography and his artwork. And the connection has to do with color first. So what we have up here is the black and white photo that is in the album. And then there's also a hand-painted photo. And that hand painting consists of both using transparent watercolor and various ways to tint the pictures, particularly in the landscapes. That probably exhausts everything I know about the technique used in that period of time, at least that I can remember. But the point I want to make here is that if we look at the paintings that Bill created, there is now at the Portland Chinatown Museum this 9x11 oil painting that's framed. So this is really almost a straight line between the photo, the painting, the coloring up there, the hand painted picture, and the oil color. Now, I do not have the dates for when this photo was hand painted or colorized, okay? But it's in the 1970s. It's dated 1918. But I don't know whether he went back and then painted it once it was in the album, or whether it was done more or less during the period of time in which he took the picture. So it'd be a surprise to see what's next here. Okay. This is a wonderful surprise to me. This photo is not in his photo albums. As I was preparing for this talk, I was going through little envelopes I have. I'm not a historian, you know, and I rediscover things. And lo and behold, on the back of a postcard, kind of, you know, material, was this colorized photo or hand-painted photo. And so because it says I'm a photography enthusiast, I brought out the colors, okay. And here's Bill on the left with some hop farmers, and they're all identified. And let's see, down the left, we have Bue Kee, Mrs. Charles Hart, Elise Sloan, an unknown person, and Mabel Welty. So this was just a wonderful surprise for me preparing for this talk, that I found this. And am I running out of time? No, I don't think I can hold that many things at once. I will move along here. Anyway, this is a thrill for me to find this. It was just, and I did scan this, and I did enhance it, and I up-resed it. These are all things that I've learned. Up-resing is great. I wish I'd get up every morning and be up-resed. It's there are a variety of hand-painted pictures in the photo albums. And these are Bill's sisters. And this is May. She's who we lived with, and she married to Jan. And this is Philip Jan, who's responsible for our family biographies and many of the stories. And this is Ruth Kee Fogg. She married Harold Fogg. And this is Myrtle, who married Frank Lee. And you can see that he was exploring colors, and he must have had very, very fine motor skills, because if you blow these up, you can see how the face is painted in, and then how all the specific features are painted in. And of course the joke is, how did he paint these? Well, with a very fine brush. But it turns out that a lot of the color was added with broad brushes, right, to tint in like the hop farms and things like that. But again, I wasn't there. I don't know how he did this. And but it's a thrill to think back about my uncle not only taking these pictures, but then exploring color and painting, which leads us to a lot of the artwork that's displayed at the museum. I think I'm almost done here. Let me see what's next. Okay. We're transitioning to the art school years. These are rare photos. It's very hard finding photos of Bill in art school. And my understanding is that his sister May was the one that provided the funds for him to pursue his art interests. And if you get a chance, I don't know if they're in the photo albums here, but to see some of the way Bill dressed, he got very formal, and you just see him over the years becoming more of a city boy. But then all of a sudden you'd see him, back on the farm. And but these are, I think some of these are actually on display here too. But the other amazing thing is that you see his art school friends, and you see the picnics that he went on with not only the art school friends, which happen to be all women, but their boyfriends. And I never knew this side of Bill. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to acknowledge my cousin Phil. He's responsible for the family biographies. These biographies tell stories about the five brothers and three sisters, and both Kiki, the grandfather, and my grandmother, who actually was adopted. She came over here at age 3 on a boat docked on Davis Street. But without Phil's biographies and many of the handwritten notes I have from Phil about stories that he remembered, because he was sent down to live on the hop farm when I think he was 3 or 4, and his mother May ran the jewelry store that was over on Everett Street, and so that was that connection there. And I actually brought a scanned copy of the biographies, and the Portland Chinatown Museum has a scanned copy which is accessible to interested individuals.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. What a wonderful first 2 presentations to follow up. Didn't know how wonderful the compliment would be to everything that I'm going to talk about generally and contextually. So thank you all. It's a beautiful day. I appreciate you being here inside in the dark. So my name is Tiah, and I run the Oregon Hops and Brewing Archives at the OSC Library down in Corvallis. And a lot of my work is to collect and preserve and share records, the things that go in boxes that we all use to tell these stories. And a lot of that work is that I preserve is the scientific research of OSU, the USDA, the hop growers associations, and the community of pickers and of growers. But I believe, I've been an archivist for about 20 years, and I believe that to be an effective archivist, it's really not enough for me to organize the things to put into the boxes, but to listen to the stories and know the stories that are inside of them. And also to know where collections are to point researchers to. So it's been wonderful to learn so much about where private collections are, where collections are in museums, where they're available online, where they are in person. So that's important to me as an archivist as well. So I have written about brewing for the Oregon Encyclopedia, and I'm working on a book that right now is out with peer reviewers, thank goodness, about women who owned and managed breweries in the 19th and 20th century in Oregon. And I'm always delighted to share with people that women inheriting breweries in that time was the norm. So it was not an unusual thing to happen. And while they weren't often recognized as owners in public spheres like newspapers, they usually were recognized in property records. So I do a lot of work in property records and divorce records, which are wonderful and depressing. And so what they all did after inheriting those breweries, it all varied. And I can't wait to see you all eventually at my book launch, and I can tell you more of these stories. So today it's an honor, though, to talk about another story that's really rooted in Oregon soil, but also invisible in many of our archives and invisible in our public memory. As an archivist, my work often means piecing together fragments. So a contract here, a newspaper article there, sometimes a ledger, sometimes an oral history, and then asking what those things reveal side by side. And when we look at Oregon's hop industry through those fragments, a different picture emerges than the ones that we normally tell. Since founding OBA in 2013, I've had the opportunity to work with lots of researchers on a variety of topics, including several who were looking into Chinese pickers and farmers. And truthfully, when I was preparing for this talk, I was actually really surprised at how many news clippings I had that I had just squirreled away in my electronic files. And delighted. And so this rest of my talk today will share some of those stories from that research for the rest throughout the rest of the state. So most of what you will see in my presentation comes from newspapers. So I'm really glad we got to see a bunch of photos before this, not just screenshots. And I do want to note, though, that these are newspapers from the time period. And so the language and in the articles and the advertisements reflects the racism of that time and can be unsettling to see. So just know that that is coming. Hold, please. Oh, there it goes. Oh, yeah. And then that's my slide that I was talking about. Oregon Hops and Brewing Archives. All right. So Oregon has a lot of hops, grows a lot of hops. New York and New England were the first areas. New York was a big state commercially to grow hops in the early 19th century. But this specialty crop moved west with the people, arriving in Oregon as early as the late 1840s, 1849, and they kind of checkmarked down. So if this is where New York is, it checkmarked down to California and then up the coast. And now most hops are grown in Washington. Oregon was second for a long time, but now is third behind Idaho. So commercial yards in Oregon first appeared here just after the Civil War. By 1867, George Wells had a hop yard in Buena Vista, and then he was followed by other farms in Polk and Lane and Benton and Marion counties. And later they grew as far south as Grants Pass and thrived in the area around Mount Angel, Silverton, and of course, Aurora. These early farms set the stage for what would become one of Oregon's most distinctive crops. Early hop farming was a small family affair, usually with farms at less than 20 acres. Some families grew hops as their sole cash crop, while for others, it was one of many crops. And early on, local families or regional indigenous people provided the labor for harvest in late August and September. And although we most often link hops with beer, historically they served many functions. They were used in cooking, they were used as home decor, stuffed in pillows, but they were also known for their medicinal uses. Reportedly, hops would help with afflictions such as flatulence, tumors, skin irritations, and mental illness. In the early 20th century, hops were plentiful in Oregon and open for experimentation. And from 1905 to 1915, Oregon was the nation's largest hop producer. Many think that it was prohibition that knocked Oregon out of that first #1 spot, but it's more complicated than that. Despite a ban on alcohol and the Great Depression, hop production actually grew after World War I during Prohibition, due to the disastrous effects of the war on European agriculture. From 1922 to 1943, Oregon regained that place as the nation's largest producer. And by the 1930s, following the repeal of Prohibition, growers expanded production to over 20,000 acres of hops for several years. In the 1930s, the area around Independence in Polk County was known as the hop center of the world, but the entire Willamette Valley felt an increased demand for seasonal labor force to harvest those. This is my favorite statistic ever, is 8 pounds. Oops. So growers advertised in newspapers to recruit urban families and provided cabins or tents. They provided water. Sometimes they provided like stores and other necessities for those hop pickers. But because the work was for unskilled pickers that were recruited from all over for this short harvest season, you often saw women and children who were hired, lots and lots of families. And of course, women and children would also have lower wage demands. And a diversity of workers were found in the field. So that meant diversity in terms of racial, economic, and geographic location. Chinese and Japanese and Filipinos made up a part of the hop harvesting labor force, and Mexican labor was later used after the war, after World War II. And by then, the farms, in the years after World War II, the farms were becoming more mechanized. And of course, many of those Mexican laborers were part of the Braceros program. I've got myself all turned around with all my notes. I should have numbered them. Okay. The story of Oregon hops as green gold, a crop that brought prosperity and reputation, is, of course, and this is why we're here, a story about immigrants and landowners, innovation and exclusion. By the 1870s and 1880s, as the hop yards expanded, Chinese cleared brushland, furnished labor crews, and eventually leased and managed hop yards. At the same time, white growers organized associations to standardize practices, set wages, and protect their investments. But Chinese labor was organized. For example, in 1889, a Polk County grower named Miles Porterfield signed a contract with Jim Sam Gong to supply a full crew to pick Porterfield's 11 acres, quote, free from leaves, stems, and binds at 50 cents a box. Porterfield, in turn, had to pay a yard boss, a cook, and also provide a cookhouse, wood, water, and transportation for those workers. Contracts like this show that Chinese labor was not simply cheap help. It was structured, negotiated, and indispensable. Leaders like Gong coordinated crews, managed logistics, and ensured quality. Meanwhile, Chinese farmers ran their own farms. In Corvallis, Samson leased the beach hop yard, and cleared $4,300 for the 1902 season alone. A trio of Chinese farmers leased the S.N. Lilly hop yard, earning $14,000 from a single harvest. Sing On signed a 10-year lease on the farm in Kiger Island and planned to convert 60 acres to a hop farm. And yet, as we were talking about earlier, the Chinese growers couldn't own their land outright. So they ended up paying a percentage, usually 25%, to the white landowner of all of that profit. And success did not protect the Chinese workers or the growers from racism. In 1893, a mob of 75 white men destroyed the homes of Chinese workers in Butteville and forced 56 pickers onto a steamer bound for Portland. At the same time, Butteville growers were forming a Hop Growers Fire Relief Association to ensure their barns and kilns. And the contrast is striking to think about property being organized and protected while the same people who were making that harvest possible were attacked and displaced. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 had compounded local hostilities, and farmers who returned to China were often barred from coming back to the US. So that disrupted the families, but also curtailed economic opportunity. And these acts of exclusion shaped who could remain in the industry and who was pushed out, which left, again, these long-term effects on land and labor. In 1914, approximately 100 hop growers, you see just a sliver of them here, 100 hop growers were listed in an Oregonian ad opposing prohibition, noting that there were roughly 1,400 growers in Oregon at the time. And what's notable to me is that this list also included a handful of Chinese growers and women. Fortunately for us, women were always labeled as Mrs. So you always knew that it was them. So 2 lines below Sid Beck's name here, you can see the Oregon Encyclopedia article, and then also there's a lovely display back there if you haven't gone back there. So 2 lines below his name was my own great-great-grandfather. My family grew hops in Goshen for decades until mildew wiped out the crop in the early 1950s. And these moments, this was a real surprise to me. These moments remind me how intertwined and personal these family community stories are. And it also reminds me, though, how unevenly these histories are documented. And white families like mine are can be easier to trace for lots of reasons. Names are a big deal, and the spelling of names and the recording of names are a big deal. And I will note that they did misspell my great-great-grandfather's last name, so there is a certain level of irony there. But Chinese families' contributions are fragmented. They're poorly recorded across contracts and census entries and newspapers and oral histories. And yet there were moments when the interests of white and Chinese growers converged. In 1915, an Oregon Hop Growers Association worked to stabilize prices and control the West Coast crop. At first, that effort failed. Too few growers were willing to join. But then Back agreed to participate, and his decision brought with him many other Chinese growers representing significant acreage. And their involvement provided this critical mass that allowed the association to survive, at least temporarily. And it was a fragile alliance and maybe more pragmatic than equal, but it reveals how deeply Chinese were embedded in the industry, even in its moments of organized power. As I've said, much of what we know about Chinese growers survives in those fragments, and each of those fragments offers us a glimpse and never the full picture. And I often, as I said before, work with these official reports, which tend to record the landowners and the lead scientists. How can archival fragments allow us to recover the stories of workers and managers who rarely appear in the records? So I want to share a story from my own book research about how we can pull the thread on these stories. And I will say this is a thread that I just pulled like 2 days ago. So this is in my world breaking news. You're all here for it. A few years ago, I was looking through a hop farm ledger at the Oregon Historical Society, which was part of a collection that was labeled the Capitol Brewery Ledger. That brewery in Salem belonged to Marguerite Beck, who's a woman that I write about in my book, and who inherited and sold the brewery before marrying a Polk County hop grower named Joseph Teal in 1906. In that ledger, there was one name that stood out to me, Wong Hem. He appeared consistently from 1916 to 1918, but unlike the pickers, it was clear to me in reading these ledgers that his entries were about management responsibilities. I did an initial search in the newspapers and in genealogy sites, and I didn't find anything. And while I was always and continue to always look for a distraction, look for another thread to pull, I knew that I needed to actually focus on the book that I was writing. So while preparing for this talk, I was thinking so much about misspelled names and how we find things and don't find things. And so I thought carefully about how names were recorded. And I went back to the census and newspapers with a different spelling. And it turned out I didn't actually have to differently spell very much. I found that Wong Hem was also recorded as Wong Him, listed as an employer on a Polk County hop farm in 1910 and recorded as passing away from abdominal cancer in Salem in 1920. And suddenly what seemed like a small misspelled ledger entry became central to the understanding of this farm's management and how the lives of workers intersected with the decisions of landowners. The gap in the ledger for 1919, there's nothing recorded for 1919, aligns with the period when he was seriously ill, and the Teal's decision to leave farming and move back to Salem that same year suddenly made sense to me. It's this kind of story that archives and archival research allow us to recover, showing Chinese growers as active, skilled, and indispensable participants in Oregon agriculture, not just peripheral laborers. Oh no, my one slide. Okay, so a slide that was supposed to be right here was going to be my own mic drop. So this slide was a screenshot from Bue Kee's oral history. So there's an oral history of Bue Kee from Benton County. So pretend like that's what you're seeing. Pretend like you're seeing screenshots right now of that. So oral histories and photographs fill in those gaps further. Interviews from the 1980s in Benton County recall Chinese workers traveling between farms, cooking in labor camps, some only staying for a season. And that includes this oral history with Bue Kee. And this is why personal stories are so important. Descendants, like those on this panel, and field archaeologists, also on this panel, working on those farm sites really help us fill in the gaps that official reports and archival fragments leave behind. Together, these sources allow us to recover that fuller picture and of both the labor and the management and the community of the life in Oregon hop farming. Oregon's hop history is not only a story of prosperity, organization, and green gold. It's also a story of erasure and exclusion and resilience. Recovering these stories requires patience. It requires attention to fragments, both fragments and slips of paper, but literally fragments in the ground, and a willingness to question archival silences. So why are things not recorded? Why are things recorded? Ledger entries, contracts, advertisements, and oral histories remind us that Oregon's hop industry was complex and diverse. By attending to these details, we can remember the labor, the skill, and the lives of the Chinese pioneers, not as footnotes, but as central to the story of Oregon hops. Thank you.
So, and as Anna mentioned, I know you all probably have lots of questions and there's lots of great information, but we wanted to just provide an
the U.S. Treasury Mint issued U.S. currency to different banks, and one was issued to the Bank of Newburgh, and signed by the Butts family. And I have a $10 bill signed by his family with Bank of Newburgh in my collection. So unfortunately, this is the only history I have left, and I'm the last of the Mohicans.
Well, we've got some names and clues. We're gonna put Tiah on the case, so we'll see if we can. Does anybody else have stories or any information they'd like to share?
I have questions. My name is Rosemary King. Is anybody else in my family there? I was in the picture of the descendants of Violet Chin at the intersection on High 5. So I know very little about my Chinese family. But what we were told very little, because my grandmother, Violet Chin, was the concubine of what we were told was a hop farm owner in Jervis. And when my grandfather died, first wife expelled the concubine and her children, one of which was my father. So I think out of hurt and bitterness over that, my father did not really ever talk about his life on hop farm. But my mother and father met on my grandfather's hop farm. So I guess I'd like to know if you know about hop farms in Jervis, because that's where we were told his hop farm was.
I want to know about.
We're gonna look.
Chelsea's taking notes.
Yeah.
I'm listening. She's me. I don't. I think what was but with names we can find out.
And I want to make sure to point out too that Kathy Bialis with HRA, who helped organize all the archaeology work and the descendants and everything, is also here. And I know some of the names from the site, they branched off, and some of them even started their own hops farms. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Jarvis is around that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Yeah.
Hello, for those of you who don't know, my name is Jackie Peterson, and I'm one of the founders of this museum. But I also have lived in the town of Monmouth, Independence, for the last 5 years. And I'm now acting in a museum, the Independence Museum, which is a really tiny museum. And it's really about hops farming. They call themselves the center of the hops farm world. And there's a picture of Sid Back that you see when you walk into the museum. And it turns out, I think this is Junior, Sid Back Jr., owned the land across the river from Independence. So I am belatedly in my career, embarking on some new research on hops farming among the Chinese families in the valley, and discovering that there's just a wealth of information. And I did remember that one of the women that I got to know really well when I was doing my work here, she had her family remembered going work in the hospitals as a child. And so I have a memory of this, and so anyway, I just want to let you know that there is an annual hops festival in Independence. And Independence was the river. This is the place where you pick the hops up on the river, and so it's an important break in trade and where they were all assembled. In fact, about a week ago, I got to make a tour of the hops farm near the Buena Vista Ferry, which is just south of Monmouth. So one of the things that I had been thinking about for this little museum of Independence was maybe trying to schedule a tour down there for everybody from this museum who might like to have a tour of the hops farms and see the museum. So if that's of any interest, we'd love to know. Maybe that thing.
Any other descendants or folks that have some other stuff to weigh in? Kathy, do you have any other fun facts that you want to share from your research?
Rosemary, I might have a little bit more information for you. So we'll chat. Yeah, I what I found really interesting also was how the different the landowners, for instance, in Christian Kesey was very supportive of Eddie as well in teaching him all the hop farming methods. And then my impression was that Eddie then ended up running all that property and managing all the harvesting, and while Christian was working on his other projects. But in the book that was written about Violet, which is just so wonderful, it's so interesting to hear about how they would work on the property that they lived on, but then move around to all the other farms also. So it's this whole traveling community that moved with the harvest and then would kind of come back to their resting place for the winter and then do the cycle again.
Thank you. Anybody else have info to share? Yeah, let's just.
We have one hotel there.
Oh, up here. Okay, sorry.
Hong Kee was my great uncle, so I think that makes Bue Kee, Min Kee, brothers, my brother's great uncle. Anyway, the thing I wanted to share was some of the research that I've done just by looking through the Historic Oregonian newspaper and searching for the words Hong Kee or Min Kee. I found this one advertisement in 1927 listing about 7 help wanted ads for hop pickers. And it seemed pretty common back then. Lots of help wanted ads were placed. And I just wanted to read this one to you. It says, hop pickers, family preferred, yard 24 miles on Oregon Electric, right to Hong Kee, Aurora, Oregon. That's all it said.
Yeah.
No address, just his name in Aurora. I thought that just was deserving of sharing. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I think, is there anyone else that wanted to share or any other questions? Well, despite our technical difficulty, our presenters worked miracles. We're only 10 minutes or 5 minutes past when we said we would be ending, so thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming today, including our incredible presenters, and all of our honored guests with connections to this history. Just a reminder that today's event is the first of 6 hidden histories, and our next one will be on October 25th. We'll be joined by archaeologist Jackie Chung and Eric Gleason for an exploration into the history of salmon canneries on the coast in Colombia. So it will be a really lovely, it'll be a lovely event. And then information on how to sign up for that will be on our website. So we usually do these via Zoom, thus this is new to us in person, but we're just delighted to be able to share space with y'all.